Welcome to Wichita Liberty TV with Bob Weeks.
Hello, I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, your weekly source for news, analysis, and commentary about Wichita and Kansas government and politics. We're broadcast on KGPT Channel 26.1, also its companion website, kgpt26.com. Some of you may know me from my blog, The Voice for Liberty. That's at wichitaliberty.org. There you'll find the motto is individual liberty, limited government, and free markets in Wichita and Kansas. So I try to cover things that may not be covered by the Wichita Eagle or other television stations or radio. Or, if we do cover the same news, I'll do it from the perspective of economic freedom, limited government, and individual liberty, because these are the things that are important. These are the things that we find so often under attack by our governments, be it at the federal, state, or local level. So please visit wichitaliberty.org. You can subscribe to the email newsletter I send a couple times a week. And if you want to contact me, you can find my email address there, or it's easy to remember, bob.weeks@gmail.com. Well, the Kansas legislature starts its session in a few days, and the city of Wichita has prepared and approved its legislative agenda. This agenda contains issues that the city believes are important to its well-being, at least those issues that are affected by state law. But wait, I have to clarify for a moment. I said city, and I meant city elected officials, bureaucrats, and the special interests that feed off the city's taxpayers. Because as we'll see in just a moment, this agenda is really written for government, not for the people, because it contains many items that are contrary to economic freedom, capitalism, limited government, and individual liberty. But before we start going through this agenda, many people might be surprised to learn of the taxpayer-funded lobbyists that work for the city, county, and school district. Well, Sedgwick County's position is currently vacant, but probably be filled soon. These people all work in Topeka to advance the agenda of their legislative bodies. So here's one agenda item from the Wichita City Legislative Agenda. It says, existing economic development tools are essential for the continued growth and prosperity of our community. Well, a few things. First of all, the premise of this item is correct. We don't have growth and prosperity in Wichita. Compared to a broad group of peer metropolitan areas, Wichita performs very poorly. So, what is the record of the Wichita metropolitan area regarding job creation? That's seeming to be the most popular statistic that our city leaders cite and promote. Well, I prepared statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, from the United States Department of Labor. I've prepared these for Wichita and a broad group of peer cities. I included our visioneering peer cities, cities that visionaries traveled to on official visits, and a few others. You may recall that visioneering is a program designed to improve the Wichita economy. And the result, as you can see, is not pretty. Because if we look at job creation starting in 1990, Wichita lags behind our visioneering peers, but not all of the peer cities that I selected. Wichita does better than Springfield, Illinois, for example. Well, I chose to include that as a peer metropolitan area because that's the immediate past city that Gary Plummer worked in. He was president of that city's Chamber of Commerce, and he's now president of the Wichita Metro Chamber of Commerce. Note the position of Springfield in terms of job growth. Last place. Well, in next to last place, we see Wichita Falls, Texas. I chose to include it because it is the immediate past home of Tim Chase. He was the head of the Wichita Falls Economic Development Corporation. Now, he's the president of the Greater Wichita Economic Development Coalition, the primary organization in charge of economic development for the Wichita area. And in second to last place, we see Pittsburgh. I added that because visioneering leaders recently made a trip there to learn from Pittsburgh. And then finally, we come to Wichita. But look how many cities have job growth greater than ours. And if we look at job creation since 2007, we find Wichita in a common position. Last place in job creation, and by a wide margin except for two cities. One is Wichita Falls. Again, that's where our present GWEDC president recently worked. And the other city that barely outperforms Wichita is Chattanooga, which I included because visioneering civic leaders recently traveled there to learn from that city. So when Wichita leaders say existing economic development tools are essential for the continued growth and prosperity of our community, they're operating from a false premise. Well, second, in general, these incentives don't work to increase jobs, economic growth, and prosperity. Now, you may remember last summer that economist Richard Sobel appeared on Wichita Liberty TV to discuss economic development incentives. He told us that they don't work. And at wichitaliberty.org, you can find a summary of the peer-reviewed academic research that examines the local impact of targeted tax incentives from an empirical point of view. Now, peer-reviewed means these studies were stripped of identification of authorship and then submitted to critique by other economists, and they were able to pass that review. So let me repeat that. Even when cities win in the economic development wars, the costs are so high and disruptive that researchers cannot find a positive benefit from engaging in these wars. Well, third, Wichita leaders often complain that Wichita doesn't have enough tools in the toolbox, they say, to compete effectively in economic development. But the city's document, the legislative agenda, lists the tools the city wants the legislature to protect. I'm showing you the list right now, and I'm pretty sure that you'll not be able to read it because the list is long and the print is fine. And some of these economic development incentives are so valuable that Kansas business leaders told the governor that they value these incentives more than they would value elimination of the state corporate income tax. That's right. The governor gave business leaders a choice: 0% corporate income tax or continuation of economic development tax credits. The business leaders chose the tax credits. And by the way, local leaders often complain that Wichita does not have enough tools in the toolbox, again, as we saw, but Wichita does have and use incentives, as we've seen. Overall, this agenda item is in opposition to what could really make our economy grow if we would just let it. We need to encourage capitalism and free enterprise, not centralized government planning, if we want the Wichita area to grow and prosper.
You're watching Wichita Liberty TV.
Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. We're looking at Wichita's legislative agenda for the upcoming session of the Kansas legislature. And here's something else on the city's legislative agenda. It says, GWEDC and Go Wichita support the existing statutory records exemptions. Now, this refers to the city wanting to prevent these agencies from having to fulfill records requests under the Kansas Open Records Act. Now, Wichita city leaders say Wichita has an open and transparent government. They say that all the time. The reality is that Kansas as a state has a weak records law, and Wichita doesn't want to follow this law, as weak as it is. This is an insult to citizens who are not able to access how their tax dollars are spent. I've been involved in this issue for some time. I have a great deal of information about this issue at wichitaliberty.org. I've testified at the Kansas legislature regarding this and may do so again if this issue comes up this year. Well, another agenda item on the city's legislative agenda is this. The Wichita City Council opposes any legislative attempts to restrict the taxing and spending authority of local governments. Well, we all know that Wichita city leaders this year are preparing to ask for a higher sales tax rate in Wichita, maybe other taxes, I don't know. So we can hope that the legislature will save us from ourselves. At best, we can hope that the legislature requires that all tax rate increases be put to a popular vote. Another agenda item is the Wichita City Council opposes any restrictions on the use of state and or local public monies to provide information to our citizens and to advocate on their behalf. Well, this is the taxpayer-funded lobbying issue. And as you can see today, many of the things that Wichita city leaders believe people want or believe that they will be good for their constituents are actually harmful. Additionally, many of the methods the city uses to engage citizens to determine their needs and wants are faulty. You may remember last week where I showed a system the city uses to gather citizen input on issues. Well, in that system, there's no option for expressing disapproval or disagreement. And additionally, last year the city and county sent out about 25,000 surveys in an effort to gauge public opinion. Many people, such as Sedgwick County Commissioner Coral Peterjohn and myself, we feel that this survey had significant problems that should cause us to question any results obtained from it. And another agenda item, the Wichita City Council supports the current framework for local elections, continuing the current February and April schedule of local primary and general elections, as well as the local option allowing nonpartisan elections. Now, you viewers remember last week that I presented my research on this matter. And the upshot is that the present system of nonpartisan elections held in the spring, it results in low voter turnout that lets special interest groups exercise greater influence than would be likely in the fall elections, and that's harmful. Well, in another agenda item, the Wichita City Council supports the development of appropriate state and local incentives to nurture and preserve arts activity throughout the city of Wichita and the state of Kansas. Well, let me translate for you. The city knows better than you how to provide for your entertainment and cultural edification and will continue to tax you for your own benefit. That's all that means. Well, and then another agenda item is public support and awareness of the possibility of passenger rail service connecting Oklahoma City and Wichita and Newton has grown over the past 2 years. And the city wants somebody to keep spending money on that. Now, I'm not really sure where the claim of public support and awareness comes from, but people are definitely not informed about the economics of passenger rail. And what's really curious is that on a national level, when you ask fiscal conservatives about which government programs should be eliminated, well, Amtrak, the national passenger rail system, ranks pretty high on that list. But we have a lot of local conservatives on the Wichita City Council and elsewhere who are promoting an expansion of Amtrak to Wichita. Amtrak is really a bad deal. In 2010, when the state of Kansas rolled out several plans for this passenger rail service expansion, I reported as follows. I said, first of all, taxpayer funding is required to pay for the startup costs for this service. Now, the state presented 4 alternatives for rail service expansion in Kansas, with startup costs ranging from $156 million up to $479 million. And then after this, taxpayer subsidies will be required every year to pay for the ongoing costs of providing passenger rail service. The 4 alternatives would require an annual operating subsidy ranging from $2 million up to $6 million. And if we take that operating subsidy and divide by the number of passengers they estimated for each alternative, the per passenger subsidy ranges from $35 up to $97 for every passenger who uses the service. Now, it would be one thing if ticket sales and other revenue sources, such as sale of food and beverages, paid for most of the cost of providing passenger rail service, and taxpayers were just being provided to give a little boost to help get the service started and keep it running. But that's not the case. Taxpayers are being asked to fully fund the startup costs, hundreds of millions of dollars, and then they're expected to pay the majority of ongoing expenses, apparently forever. Well, around the same time, I also reported on the Heartland Flyer route specifically. This is the route that starts in Fort Worth, up through Oklahoma City, and then to Wichita and Newton. Now, this data is from 2010, but I doubt that much has changed since then. Now, Amtrak itself reports a profit loss per passenger mile on this route of minus 2 cents, meaning that each passenger per mile traveled results in a loss of 2 cents. Taxpayers pay for that. But that number, as bad as it is really misleading. There's a service called Subsidy Scope, which calculated a different number. The number they calculated, unlike the numbers Amtrak publishes, include depreciation and overhead costs, the type of costs that private sector businesses must pay and report. And when these costs are included, the Heartland Flyer route results in a loss of 13 cents per passenger mile, or a loss of $26 per passenger for the trip from Fort Worth to Oklahoma City. While asking the taxpayers of Wichita to pay subsidies every time someone boards an Amtrak train, that doesn't sound like economic development, much less a program that people living in a free society should be forced to fund. Yet, this is something that we pay someone to promote for us in Topeka. And if you are a citizen and interested in government, you might find your local government's taxpayer-funded lobbyists testifying in opposition to you at legislative hearings in Topeka. You will find, if you pay attention, that your local government representatives over and over are working against economic freedom, capitalism, limited government, and individual liberty. We shouldn't have to tolerate that. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. Well, as you may know, it's likely this year that Wichita city leaders, both those in government and those in the private sector, will ask us to vote for a higher sales tax to pay for a number of things. One of those things is likely to be a new convention center. Our leaders want to seek economic development through expanding our convention business. Now, on its face, pursuit of a convention business seems like a noble effort by city leaders. Vast streams of economic development will follow, they say. But is this pursuit of convention business wise? Well, there's a professor in the Department of Public Administration at the University of Texas at San Antonio named Haywood Sanders. He's a noted critic of public efforts to chase convention business for economic development. In 2005, he wrote a report titled Space Available: The Realities of Convention Centers as Economic Development Strategy, and that was published by the Brookings Institution, which is a prominent and left-leaning think tank. This report provides a look at the realities of the convention trade. Well, Haywood writes that convention center business has been on the decline, and it started well before the terrorist attacks in 2001. Attendance is down, demand for exhibit space is down, and demand for hotel rooms has fallen too. Haywood notes that the decline in convention business is a structural decline. He wrote that the reasons for decline are the product of industry consolidation, reductions in business travel in the face of increasing cost and delay, and also alternative means of conveying and gathering information. And we've got the internet today, and it keeps getting better all the time. And he adds that these are not cyclical trends that are likely to reverse in the future. Instead, he believes they are structural. But here's the real problem, according to Haywood. He says, despite diminishing demand, the last few years have seen a remarkable boom in the volume of exhibit space in U.S. convention centers. The building of larger convention centers in many cities means that more cities are able to host large events, or cities can now host several smaller events all at the same time. The result, says Haywood, is fierce competition for both large and small events. And it's not uncommon for cities to give away meeting space and other expensive items in order to lure conventions to their city. And last year in August, the Wichita City Council voted to pay a subsidy of $650,000 to the United States Bowling Congress so that it would hold a women's bowling tournament here in Wichita. And then, what about the cost of these convention centers? Well, the author, Haywood, includes a section on costs with this. He says, the studies that justify both the new center space and the new publicly owned hotels paint a picture of tens of thousands of new out-of-town visitors and millions of dollars in economic impact. But despite that rhetoric, these projects carry real risks and larger potential costs, particularly in an uncertain and highly competitive environment. The convention center that we may build is just the start of the costs. Haywood wrote in his report, a new convention center is thus often followed by a subsidized or fully publicly owned hotel. Well, in Wichita, we've already got the fully publicly owned hotel, the large 303-room Hyatt in downtown Wichita. And Wichita has been providing and seeks to expand subsidy programs for other downtown hotels. And none of the hotels provide as many rooms as Wichita Convention Center planners say the city needs, so we're likely to see proposals for subsidies to hotels to continue. In fact, until Wichita has as many hotel rooms as our nation's largest convention center cities have, there's always a larger goal, the next rung on the ladder. Really, can you ever imagine our city leaders saying, that's it, we've got enough hotel rooms in downtown Wichita? Well, other things Haywood says that are likely to be proposed are a sports arena. Well, here in Wichita, we just opened the taxpayer-financed and government-owned facility, the Interest Bank Arena. And when that arena opened, there was a brief honeymoon period with good financial performance. But since then, the arena has settled down to a less acceptable level of revenue production. Did you know that? Well, probably not, because the financial results of the arena that are promoted by Sedgwick County, the owner of the arena, these results don't include depreciation costs. So the true financial picture is not anywhere near complete. Now, you can find these depreciation costs in the city's comprehensive annual financial report, but not many people read that type of document, and the news media doesn't report it. But back to Haywood's paper for a moment. He writes that entertainment, retail, and cultural attractions are often proposed near a convention center, and Wichita downtown planners have indicated their desire for these. And downtown boosters, again, are likely to propose a sales tax to support these efforts. But the conclusion to Haywood's paper describes Wichita's current situation and foreshadows what is likely for the future of Wichita. He wrote, "But if taxing, spending, and building have been successful, the performance and results of that investment have been decidedly less so. Existing convention centers have seen their business evaporate, while new centers and expansions are delivering remarkably little in terms of attendance and activity." And he continued, he wrote, "What is even more striking in city after city is that the new private investment and development that these centers were supposed to spur and the associated thousands of new visitors, this has simply not occurred. Rather, City and Convention Bureau officials now argue that cities need more space and more convenience to lure these promised conventions. And so underperforming convention centers now must be redeemed by public investment and ownership of big new hotels. And when these hotels fail to deliver the promises, then the excuse is that more attractions or more retail shops or even more convention center space will be needed to achieve the goal of thousands of downtown visitors." Well, in Wichita, we already see some of this excuse-making taking place. Private investment in downtown Wichita has been weak, it is said, because there is not yet a critical mass of development. It is promised by downtown boosters that, given enough public money, critical mass will be achieved and private investment will rush in. But since there is no definition of what constitutes critical mass, this excuse is always available to justify failure. And not much economic activity has taken place around Wichita's new downtown arena. The retail space that the city owns that's practically in the shadow of the arena, well, it's mostly vacant except for government offices. That, you remember from the video tour I showed you a few months ago, that's the retail space where a window is held together by duct tape. And maybe that's part of the problem. Well, a new convention center is the type of shiny object that can attract and hold the attention of mayors, city council members, and government bureaucrats. But as we see, this is not a fruitful path for economic development. Let's hope that our local government is honest with us when it pitches a new tax for a new convention center. Well, thanks for watching Wichita Liberty TV. I'm your host, Bob Weeks.